Salutations readers, welcome back to the Citigo Writer channel. My name is Nkechi, and for today we're doing a book review video. Now, as you can tell from the thumbnail, I will be talking about The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. This has been a book that's been in my TBR since, I think, late last year, and that's also around the same time that I've even heard about this book. Now, if you don't know anything about this book, just know that this is Simon Jimenez's sophomore novel. Simon Jimenez is a queer Filipino author, and he has written The Vanished Birds. That was his debut novel, and The Spear Cuts Through Water is his sophomore novel. This is a story within another story kind of deal, all right? I'm gonna try to not talk too much about actually the plot and things, at least not in this section, because I do kind of want to give y'all some thoughts really on what this book really is about, because even though this is a book that did come out last year, it came out, I think, around late last year. I don't want to give up too much on the synopsis and what things are going on here. But if you are a little bit curious, I will also give, I think I'll put some timestamps as well, where I'm pretty much going to give y'all no spoilers, just like overall general thoughts. And then I'll go to more light spoilers. Not anything too heavy, but a little bit more information on the book. Because I truly believe that this is the kind of story that you should know very little about. But if you, again, if you're someone who wants to be a little bit curious, I'll give you a little bit more information. But for those of you who want to kind of know very little, but just like at least just some semblance of this book, this is pretty much a story following two warriors who have to shepherd an ancient god across a broken land to end a tyrannical reign of a royal family called the Moon Throne. That's pretty much the baseline right there. It's a story within a story within another story. It does shift in perspectives. Like, we use first person, we use second person, we even use third person, all of that. We all use all of that simultaneously, even in one page, so you definitely gotta pay attention. This is not a story that you can just have in the background kind of thing. Like, no, you really need to actually focus to know what actually is going on here. And I do recommend reading it physically. I don't actually recommend the audiobook. Usually I'm the kind of person like, definitely go with the audiobook kind of thing, or even to hybrid read or whatever. But I definitely recommend like a physical / ebook kind of route. I don't think that the audiobook will be that as helpful. I don't really like the audiobook narrator, and there is only one narrator, which I think is the worst mistake. It's actually a pretty terrible mistake to do for this kind of a story. I think this would have worked better with like a full cast kind of a thing, but that's just my personal opinion. And some content warnings as well. Cannibalism, graphic, which definitely surprised me. I was like, wait, what? This is also a pretty dark story as well, so there is violence, death, murder, kind of stuff like that. So that's pretty graphic stuff. Some more moderate will be child abuse, some sexual content, and also ableism. Just want to let people know about that as well. And there is a minor kind of warning on sexual assault. So I think that is the main stuff that y'all will need to know. And actually, I found out about this book, I think initially from Tammy Tries to Read here on YouTube and on Instagram. She brought my attention to this book. And then someone I follow on Instagram, Leah from Eurydice Reads, is the one that's actually been hyping Simon Jimenez's works since, like, at least from my knowledge, last year. She's even described it as well as darker version of Princess Mononoke. So if you're into like Studio Ghibli kind of vibes, I will also agree this does give some Studio Ghibli kind of vibes. So if you're into Princess Mononoke, then definitely go with The Spear Cuts Through Water. Highly recommend. And it is indeed a chonker, and I did also annotate as well. So I do have some tabs, I have some pen annotations and some post-it note notations as well. That's pretty much all I got for y'all. For anyone who doesn't want to know too much, but just some baseline stuff, that's practically all you will need to know. Now we're going to get to the section where I pretty much talk a lot more about what this book entails. So if you don't want to know about that, thank you for watching, or you want to get to the outro, whatever, go over there. But for now, this is for people who want to know a little bit more actually about what this book was, and then my true thoughts on this one as well. So like I said, this is a story following two warriors, June and Kima. They are the ones who are in charge of shepherding a goddess, who was an ancient god that actually somehow gave powers to this tyrannical family, because in a weird sense of way, she's actually their mother, actually. Like, this ancient god is the mother of 3 sons that pretty much reign terror across the land. And that's why we have this thing called the Moon Throne, because they're the thrones that are in charge of the moon, because that's actually who the ancient god is. It's literally the moon. So June, who is the son of one of those terrors who pretty much wants to like repent from his sins and stuff because he knew that what he was doing was really wrong. Like those three sons of the moon, there are terrors. They're literally referred to as the first terror, second terror, third terror. Those three are horrible, honestly, in their own messed up ways, okay? And then we have Kima, who is pretty much actually, I want to say he's not necessarily a nobody, but he is someone that he's pretty much like a regular kind of guy. He's been like a guard and stuff. Not with like the moon throw specifically, but with one of the gates and stuff, one of the checkpoints. And actually, that's another thing too, actually, with this book, is that there is a map of the land here. Now, it's not quite your traditional kind of map, but I do think this is a very, very cool map. So that's June and Kima, and they are in charge of guiding this goddess throughout the land in order to pretty much aid this tyrannical royal family, because if not, then it'll just continue on. And also there is an emperor as well who goes through a pilgrimage of some sort and takes place over like across 5 days, which is pretty much how the story is also going through as well. It does go through like before the pilgrimage, after the pilgrimage, and also within those 5 days and all of that. So that is how the story is structured. And also it does not have chapters. There are pretty much sections, basically. So that like there's the before, there's the first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, and after. There's even like an actual like table of contents / schedule of the holy pilgrimage, we're calling it, basically. And like I said before, this is indeed a story within a story within a story, because the story of these two, which actually the main characters are actually the ones in front here, those two shepherding the moon to end this tyrannical family, pretty much is a story within the story, because that's the main story. That's like at the heart, the meat of the story. Outside of this story, we have an unnamed narrator who is in this dream where they enter an inverted theater. It's like a magical realm, pretty much, of spirits and stuff, where they're watching a live performance of this story. Okay, but then outside of that, outside of this dream this dream thing here, we have our unnamed narrator here, our unnamed character, who's going through life in a country with like a family, talking with Lola, which is pretty much his grandmother, talking about this kind of inverted theater here, and also about his family, like with his father and his brothers, and even his own life as well. So that's even outside of that. So yeah, there's like 3 layers here, okay? We have the outside, like our usual normal world. We have where we are in the theater itself, where we actually see our unnamed narrator looking at this performance, like on a stage kind of thing. And then we actually get to see the actual characters of the stage, more like actually like these main characters here inside, and following that story as well. So yeah, that's the story within a story within a story. There are layers to this, y'all. Layers. So that's the first thing for sure. So that's just like really what the synopsis and plot and all that stuff. And it is also true that there are indeed a lot of shifting perspectives. And just also because of that, because of how this story is structured, it did take me a long time actually to read this book. This is the longest I've ever had to read a book. Well, actually, technically speaking, that's not true. Actually, I'm sorry, that's a lie. But it has been the longest I've ever read a book this year. I started reading this book I initially tried to read this book via audio in March, or like around my birthday. I wanted to read the audiobook because I got the audiobook code, and that's when I realized, I was like, you know what, this audiobook is not that good, actually. So then in May, for Asian Readathon, I kind of wanted to add it to the TPR there, so I can like try it again physically, and I did pick it up in May. I didn't finish it in May, or June, or July, or August. I finally finished this book recently in September. However, I did give this book 5 stars. That's a solid 5 stars, because of so many different reasons. 1, the writing. I love Simon Jimenez's writing. Okay, he has a really beautiful lyrical writing style. This entire story is very lyrical, and so if you're into that kind of like writing style, then I definitely recommend this book for sure. Actually, I just recommend both of his books, actually, but I personally have more of a soft spot with The Spear Cuts Through Water more, because I do think that The Spear Cuts Through Water is going to be a story that will hold on to me longer than The Vanished Birds. Now, don't get me wrong, I love The Vanished Birds, but this one is, I actually believe it's a league of its own, and not just with like the writing, it's also the way the descriptions and how we get the characters and how we're shifting the perspectives. I also love the narration, the narrative structure. I like the fact that we are shifting through time and perspectives. I like the fact we can get from the main gritty part of the story to our own narrator, and how our own narrator is actually looking about the story itself in his own perspective and stuff. I think that's actually a great idea to go about that way, because the way that this story is told, sure, with a certain perspectives, but it also reminded me like an elder telling you a very long story, but the kind of story that makes you go, I guess it's a kind of like a folk tale kind of thing that you will learn from an elder in your own like home country kind of a thing. But another thing I also really loved too was the characters. Now I can't really say much about our unnamed narrator because the unnamed narrator does have an arc in a way, but it's very subtle. I really liked how Sam Jimenez wrote our unnamed narrator as the kind of person that's like not really well versed into like their own family history or even their home country or anything like that, and the kind of stories that they tell, but then pretty much getting forced into being in this inverted theater to actually see a performance of such kind in here as well. I think that's really, really fascinating. And then not just even our unnamed narrator, I also think as well that our main protagonists, actually, June and Kima, were also very interesting characters. I like seeing Kima's arc into pretty much being less alone, really starting to crave human connection and having someone that you can care for, not just like quite care for, but someone that you can connect to and have an actual chance to get that kindness and desire, you know? And because it also, there's another thing too. This is queer. This is a queer book, y'all. Like I'm like totally queer as hell. Okay, love it. If y'all want a queer read, this is your book, okay? And for June, I also thought his arc was also really, really interesting, especially since he was the favorite son of the first terror, and how for him he had to, when he learned, well, really mostly on like the moon's influence, who is also his grandmother, which actually is a whole nother thing. Actually, like. That whole thing, actually, when I was reading this book, I was like, wow, it's kind of crazy that your grandmother is pretty much the moon. It's very interesting when you think of it in that way. And how you pretty much have to guide your grandmother in a way, guide your grandmother to pretty much the end of this pilgrimage thing, and pretty much actually to even kill her own sons, actually. Those are like her kids. She's going to have to kill them. Which is also an interesting thing as well with her as well, because there is actually a part in this story where we do get literally just the moon's perspective. We're in her head, and I think that was the most fascinating way to look at her character, to look at how she even became a moon to some sort of immortal looking woman. Like, how did that happen? Y'all, when you read this, it's interesting. It's so fascinating. I find that to be so fascinating. And just seeing even how June and Kima start to learn to trust each other, to want each other, connect and love each other, all the things, okay? I'm just like, yes, just yes, okay? I'm here for it. And then the world in here, the way is just, I don't know how on earth I can explain it, honestly, because I'm not quite I don't know, like the way this world has been described, the way it works, is indeed like very much tyranny. Like, it is terrifying the way that the normal people have to live in this world in order to survive and stuff. It's actually really, really messed up. But it is so interesting and lush and descriptive, and even get some parts where something would happen in the performance story, you know, but then we get some little bit more explanation when we go back to our narrator talking to like his Lola about some things that's part of their culture, and it's actually applied to the actual story here. I'm just like, see, you know what? This is how you give me information on the world. Okay, let's do this. Okay, I'm just like, y'all, when you read this, you just gotta come into this book without really much. You can't come into like the regular knowledge of how a story is structured, because it's not gonna work in that way. I like the unconventional ways that this book was written, and I think I need more stories like this. But the thing, though, I really loved about this book was the themes, okay? The themes for this story, it's so good. Like, we have a theme of family. The major theme of this book is family in all ways of life. Like, we see family between the moon and her 3 sons, and how she has to end their lives because this way that the world is at this time, where there is literally no moon in the sky. It can't go on like this. They have to die, but in a way, she has a sort of love for them as well, even though she was indeed an absent parent for pretty much majority of their lives. And then the way that the sons also crave for her as well, because the emperor, their father, does not want them to convene with their mother at all. And in fact, actually, the mother is actually hidden behind a prison of her own. So the sons are not even allowed to meet their mother. Like, they can't talk to her, they don't do nothing. So it's like, wow, that's actually really messed up, actually. And how there's some sort of abandonment, but also a neglect as well. And also just straight up child abuse. That's where the child abuse comes in, actually. and it's really, really bad, especially with one of the sons. One of the terrors actually had really the short end of the stick there. So it's really interesting to see their dynamics and their relationship, their complicated feelings. Everything's actually pretty complicated on how their feelings are. Not just with like the moon and the terrors, but even the moon and June, like her grandson. Like that kind of relationship as well was also interesting. And how I don't think June really looks at her quite like a grandmother. I don't think that's how he looks at her at all. I think he looks at her as like, you know, the goddess that she is. But I think they both also forget that that is also grandson and grandmother, you know, like there's still that, but it's also a distance because of how the way that their family operates. And then we have Kima, who doesn't really have any family. He doesn't really have anyone, actually. He's actually pretty much just alone. And because of the fact that he also is missing an arm, people just pity him. They look down on him. That's where also the ableism comes in as well. They pity him. They look down on him. But, you know, he's still standing there being able to guard and defend himself. But it does make things very, very lonely for him. And especially as a queer person, too, you know. So that's that loneliness, that longing, that yearning for a connection, a desire to be with someone else, you know. And I think that was also really, really interesting to see in that sense. So I mean, sure, there's the family, but there's also on sexuality as well. And then also outside of the performance story, we also have our unnamed narrator with his father and his Lola as well, and also with his brothers, to see how all of that family dynamic as well. And the time, I mean, I'm not quite sure on the time period of the outside story here as well, so I can't give too much on that one either, because I have no idea. But I also thought it was very, very interesting also to see our unnamed narrator also deal with like the fact of like the father. And I found it to be so interesting in how those two stories in particular were overlapping. And there's actually a whole lot of overlapping, despite the fact we have a story within a story within a story. It's not just separate. All these stories are connected because of one thing, and I'm not gonna say what that one thing is, because that is a major spoiler, and I'm here for the light spoiler stuff. So the main thing here, the main themes honestly really is family, sexuality, love, sacrifice, all of these complex family dynamics, I think is so interesting. I think Simon Jimenez did a great job portraying all of that, to the point that it was just really, really interesting. It was just so fascinating to see how this story was even written. So far, this is indeed my favorite, and I have given both of his books 5 stars, but this is definitely a clear favorite, and also possibly the best book I've read this year. I'm going to say it. I think it is the best book I've read this year so far. I don't know if anything else could top it. So, which is why, in conclusion, this is indeed a 5-star read. And I really want more people to read this book. I do think this has just been under the radar. It's not a lot of people have been talking about it. I recommend this book to anyone who is interested in reading, who's pretty much like interested in like stories within a story within a story, number 1. 2, creative narrative structures, like multiple shifting perspectives, all this stuff. 3, who are here for pretty much a literary fantasy standalone that's also queer. We gotta go with that. Oh wait, I think 3. 4, anyone who's also here for pretty much a story about family, love, sexuality, sacrifice, all the complicated feelings of pretty much this family dynamic. If you're interested in all that, I recommend this book. I don't know. And also if you're here for dark Studio Ghibli vibes, that's very violent and stuff, and magical, of course, The Spirit Cuts Through Water is for you. But anyways, I think that is it. That's all I really have for y'all. Thank you for coming on to this video. If you liked it, like it, subscribe, you know, all the things. Comment down your thoughts. Have you read The Spirit Cuts Through Water? If you have, please, let's discuss in the comments. I want to talk to more people about this book, especially if you have any other insights on the book itself that I have not talked about in here. Please, let's talk, okay? Let's just talk. Now, if you made it this far into the video, but you're not totally sure what to comment, we'll go with the emoji of a spear. Hence, the spear cuts through water. But anyways, thank you all again for coming to this video, and I hope to see you all in my next one. Bye-bye.